Now I will hand over to Jan de Veerschild.
Yeah, thank you for the very kind introduction, and good afternoon to everyone. So a small history lesson, and I will try to finish on a short outlook on what could be some of the next steps. And I go back all the way to the start of the pandemic. And this is the longitudinal European open study on SARS-CoV-2. And that was a study that was initiated within the first days after the pandemic arrived in Germany. And it was basically a bottom-up study from concerned infectious disease clinicians who reached out to other stakeholders and put together this registry. And I think it was one of the first larger scale European projects that started in the field and had the support of the German Centers for Health Research and also some European medical societies. So this was, as I said, a bottom-up approach. There was hardly any funding at start. There was one foundation who supported us with a minor grant in the early times. We later received some funding from the German Center for Infection Research to be able to keep the data provision running and some of the processes. But basically, this was a registry based on in-kind contributions, data donations from many different sites. And one of our complexities we had to tackle was that if there's no funding, we needed to circumvent the necessity for an informed consent. And 5 years ago, we didn't have a strong, we didn't have the same legal situation as today. We didn't have so many discussions about how to use data protection laws as we have maybe today. So the situation could be a bit different today, but back then we really had to deal with a very vanilla interpretation of GDPR, and therefore really had to cut corners on which data we collect, and still, could be anonymous. And I know it's a difficult to define term. Anyhow, it was very successful. We had data donations from many different continents. Of course, we had our strong point in Germany. We had a lot of Turkish centers, interestingly, but also from other European countries. And we collected a detailed description of over 13,000 patients based on in-kind contributions from more than 900 people. And I think what was, besides, of course, the fact that we had a very concerning pandemic going on and everybody, or many people at least, wanted to do something good and contribute, I think some of the core reasons why LEOSS was so successful and had comparably easy onboarding of other centers and stakeholders was that we from the start said, if we want people to donate, then we have to give something back. So we want to have an open government. There were equal rights for all contributors. The voting was based on contributions, and so while it never came to that, people could have just voted me out of my chair at any given time, and we had like really open policies. And of course, if you don't have funding, that's also much easier to do because there's like no legal responsibility for fulfilling a project plan. But I think that was really a great experience. And I think if you can do it, it's the right way to go. And then we also said we have open data. And many projects say they have open data. So we, from the start, were thinking about how can we make people believe that we actually mean this and we will actually share the data. And so what we did is that we had like our pipelines, which automatically published current analyses of the data based on recommendations from the community directly on the homepage. And we had data explorers where you could play around with the data. And there was an anonymous data set that you could download directly and analyze for yourself. We, however, as you can see, as the project grew and as more and more stakeholders joined the project, of course, they all brought their requirements. And I said the title is Longitudinal European Study. When we started, the L was for lean, and because we thought we would make a very simple and small trial, but it wasn't lean anymore at some point because of the many different medical societies asking their specific questions. So we had a very comprehensive data set when we finished. And that also increased the demands on anonymization because singling out, of course, is quite possible if you have so many different questionnaires all for the same patient. And that forced us to really make a data science process out of every data release because we had to ascertain that every data release was in itself anonymous. We had an exemption granted by the data privacy officers that we as in the data center could hold data that may or may not be fully anonymous, but we were only allowed to release anonymous data. And that actually, we did this very nice study with colleagues from the BIH, Fabian Prasser and his team, where we analyzed whether the anonymization process, which also forces you to aggregate some data types and you lose some details in order to conserve as many data sets as possible. But still, after achieving a certain size of close to 1,000 data sets, actually the statistical analyses became quite stable, even with the anonymized data sets. So we think with this rather large data set, actually meaningful analysis were possible. Now, after some months, the NUM study, the Network University Medicine came to life, and our efforts moved on to the National Pandemic Cohort Network. So to have a prospective cohort with biosampling, deep phenotyping, but also, of course, requiring patient consent, and that and basically this was a synergy between three different existing cohorts based on the COVID-Dome cohort in Lübeck and Kiel, which became the population-based platform, then the high-resolution platform from the Charité, which was rolled out to other centers that did some deep phenotyping on mostly critically ill inpatients and looking at all the different ICU parameters. And then we had the cross-sectoral platform, more or less as a bridge between them, looking at symptomatic patients in all areas of care, from the general practitioner up to the university hospital. And this was, I mean, given the time and the lack of an pre-existing infrastructure, this was a rather large study with 70 different participating centers contributing data to the various cohorts and coming from various health sectors. And NAPKON, as you may remember, started quite late because the decision to found the Network University Medicine took some time, then it needed some time to find itself, then the cohort planning group was instated, etc. And after everything was settled, the first patient could be included in November, despite very high efforts on all sides to move forward as fast as possible. So by that, we were 8 months behind other international cohorts. And our idea was to focus on deep phenotyping and really deeply analyzing cases and include all medical disciplines involved in COVID-19 and post-COVID treatment. So not to have the most the earliest or the fastest moving cohort, but the most deeply characterized on the planet. So that was our idea. And for that, we found it very important to have highly standardized analysis of the patients. So We wrote SOPs for more than 70 examinations, and for example, in the high resolution cohort, we also had like standardized MRI and CT scans. In the cross-sectoral platform, we did lumbar punctures for study reasons, etc. So really high effort examinations that are usually something you try to circumvent when you are planning your study. Yeah. And so, of course, a lot of different data items to record all that, a lot of instruments for patient-reported outcomes. And also we have a basic data set available for public download. So the table is not translated. I ask to excuse that. It's also not completely current. I'm very sorry. I noticed too late that I don't have current figures. But we are now somewhere, I think, in the 170s regarding data applications. But the basic message is that the data and the biosamples are freely available for applications. We have a use and access process that is very open. I think our acceptance rate in the second round, I mean, in the first round, there's sometimes some quality issues that need discussion. But in the second round of applications, the acceptance rate is I think 98 or 99%. So we are trying to be really generous with the data and biosamples, and it is really frequently used and also our user access committee is working really hard on getting the data out. So the time to approval is usually less than 4 weeks. Of course, getting all the data and biosamples together, we have a decentralized biobank. The samples are currently still stored within the centers which collected them. So it may take some time until you ultimately receive the data and biosamples. But the release process, the decision process is very lean and unpolitical. It's really about the quality of your application. And so it's not only the clinical data and the biosamples, but we also had core labs which performed a lot of omics analyses of the biosamples. So we have whole genome sequencing, transcriptomes, epigenetics, proteomics, metabolomics, and most of the things that are beautiful and expensive have been done with all, or at least a lot of the patients, patient samples we have collected, and these are also available for application from data scientists. Okay, and finally, the ORCHESTRA cohort, which is actually not one cohort, but it's a European collaboration of different cohorts, and NAPKON partially participated in that, and LEOSS too. And we also had the responsibility within the consortium to try to make it as open to the scientific community as possible. And so the open data, open science activities of ORCHESTRA were part of our work package. So ORCHESTRA brought together European cohorts in a common data framework with national hubs and a central hub. I think for time reasons, I will not talk you completely through the slide. As you can see, each work package was had, because it was called ORCHESTRA, each working package was one instrument. So the coordination here was the drum, trying to keep the rhythm of the project. And yeah, but also within ORCHESTRA, patients were prospectively recruited in the different work packages, and these data were made available for analyses that were defined within the project at first. But again, we and actually again in collaboration with the BIH and Fabian Prasser, we released a public data set on the webpage, which is still available. And there's also an exploration tool where you can play around with the data online and build your own sub-cohorts to see which data is available. And we used that, for example, because again, ORCHESTRA, until everything was in place, the pandemic was running for 2 years. So I think it didn't have major contributions to the understanding of the pandemic by itself. But for example, we were able to use the data for mass validation study, where we looked at hundreds of different scores, which have been suggested to evaluate the severity and possible outcome of COVID-19, and with this we were able to check this in a large cohort, which of the scores actually works best, and also to open the data a bit more to the public. We had the science challenges where we called for applications regarding selected topics. And then these applications were screened by a decision board, and then the projects that won this tender received the ORCHESTRA data for their analysis. That was something we put a lot of effort in, but again, I think because it was quite late in the pandemic, the application started in September 2022. We received some requests, and actually some projects were derived from it, but we actually hoped to receive more applications for the data. Now, when we look back at NAPKON, what we are currently working on is the study network of the Network University Medicine, where we want to bring together the lessons learned and the teams and the network from the National Pandemic Cohort Network, with the expertise and the data platforms in the NOM clinical epidemiology and study platform, short LEOSS, which actually is a split-off project from NAPKON. It is based on the infrastructures in NAPKON and in the DZHK for NOM project, so of the German Center for Cardiovascular Research, which has provided the data platforms for NAPKON. And this was joined together in one project as a support, as a technical and methodological support platform, and with the data integration centers from the Medical Informatics Initiative and the clinical routine data that is available there. And we hope that if we bring the best of those 3 projects together and have built effective collaborations with key partners, and NFDI4Health is one of those, and the coordinating centers for clinical studies, of course, and probably in the future also QUEST. We are also talking about things and have some meetings going on. I think this is one very important pillar, and also to involve the stakeholders, the pharmaceutical industry, the PIs that perform clinical research, and together derive effective measures to improve recruitment in clinical trials in Germany, attract more studies, and provide better data and biosamples in studies. And one part of that is to have several chapters within this study network, and these will focus on certain disease areas. And the first one is the study network infectious diseases. And for this, we now have a master study protocol in place that has a very broad ethics vote and a very broad master study protocol, which has been rolled out across the 15 pilot sites now and has started recruiting at the start of May. And I think this is really for us very exciting, because it will allow to put many of the scientific decisions back into the hands of the principal investigators. And so we only need to bother the ethics committees when we do really major changes, but we also have a lot of capability to change the day-to-day recruitment priorities within this master study protocol. And this will allow us a true pandemic preparedness, allowing us to shift recruitment towards new pathogens, basically within hours, within the time it takes to make a few phone calls. So as a current status, because it says meet the data, for LEOSS, you can still request data. The anonymous data set will remain available, I guess. The original data will probably be destroyed by the end of the year because, as I said, it was a granted exception that we were allowed to collect it. And I think we will not be able to share that data anymore from 2026. So if you're still interested in that, you should apply soon. NAPKON will remain available on the long term, the data, and there are still biosamples left, especially of the less attractive visits. The baseline visit, of course, has been requested a lot, but the other visits, there's still a lot of biosamples left. We have much of the analysis data is available. And for 2025, in normal cases, we will not request funding for samples and data delivery. ORCHESTRA is basically not open science. I think the cohorts would still allow applications for the data. The anonymous data set remains available for download. And with the Genome Study Network and the master protocol of the infectious disease network, we are starting recruitment now, so we're not in a hurry to share the data before it has been curated a bit. But I think we will start accepting applications for data and biosamples in 2026. So this is a brief overview. Happy to discuss with you, and thank you again for inviting me today.